Well, good morning, everybody. I can see that we've got quite a few attendees registered already, so it's 10 o'clock and we shall make a start. And if I just do a brief introduction whilst inevitably the last few attendees can log on to the webinar. Welcome. My name is Rob Gould from Barker, and hopefully many of you are familiar with us already with a Confederation of School Trust Platinum Partner for Property Consultancy, and we've organised this webinar in conjunction with EO Consulting, and it's been an excellent take up. So it's obviously a very hot topic, this streamlined energy and carbon reporting objective that's come up, and so we're going to tackle that today. I'm going to introduce and hand over to Jonathan Coyles shortly. I'm sure he's known to many of you as well. Jonathan is Director of EO Consulting, which is part of Barker, and EO are experts in harnessing the power of data really to meet performance and operational objectives, predominantly in the education sector. So many of you will be familiar with the portal solution for managing estates data and compliance data, but also energy data, and that's where it's relating to today's webinar on the streamlined energy and carbon reporting requirements. And we'll talk more widely about how that can then be implemented in bringing to bear energy transformation strategies for your academies and trusts. So the way that the session should work today is that I'll shortly hand over to Jonathan to deliver his webinar presentation, and at the same time there is a Q&A panel which should be available to you. On my screen it's the top right, but it might differ from your machine to machine. But there is a Q&A panel, and if there are questions during the presentation, if you'd like to type them in there, I will try and curate those questions, and if there are some common themes coming up, perhaps hand them over to put Jonathan on the spot towards the end to do a bit of a Q&A session. But what I also will do, and what we've done in previous sessions, is then collate any sort of common themes that are coming up and provide some written responses to those questions as a sort of FAQs document, and we'll issue those out to all the webinar delegates along with the slide deck following completion of the webinar session. So I hope that's okay. I think we've still got a few more attendees to come along, but bearing in mind the timescales, I think we should just press on. So I'm going to hopefully send Jonathan's video live and hand over to him for the presentation. Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome everyone this morning. I'm hopefully going to give a fairly broad overview of the streamlined carbon reporting. I think that we're going to start with three questions, and I think the first one, is it just me? Is it just Academy Trust that are having to do this? What's it going to mean to us, and why are we doing it? And I think the most important bit is the why are we doing it. So let's go on and look at what it means. So it isn't just academies, it's any organisation which has consumption over 40,000 kilowatts in a 12-month period. You have to have assets worth over £18 million, a head count of over 250 people, and your turnover must be over £36 million a year. So what does that mean for an academy trust? A single form primary will have energy consumption of over 40,000 kilowatts. So the consumption target really isn't one to worry about. It's probably going to apply to everybody out here. School buildings, the assets over £18 million in your annual accounts, that probably equates to a secondary school and a primary school. So if you're a trust that has a secondary school and a primary school, the chances are your assets will be over £18 million in your accounts. Do you employ over 250 people? It's not full-time equivalents, which obviously a lot of figures in the education space are based around full-time equivalents. It's actually about 250 people. So that includes anybody you employ directly, whether that's cleaners, catering staff, teachers, administrators. So it's 250 people. And again, what funding do you receive from the Department for Education? £36 million. Obviously, that starts to become a challenge in smaller trusts. So again, it may be one of the thresholds that won't necessarily apply to you. So we've done some analysis of the size of the trusts, and we've looked at and this is maybe some of you hopefully won't switch off and you'll wait to the end of my presentation because you work out it doesn't apply to you. There's 865 academy trusts that have assets in your accounts of over £18 million. We've worked that out of probably about £3-4 million a primary school and about £12 to £13 million a secondary. So if you work that ratio out on the size of your trust, then that probably gives you a clue that you're probably one of those 865 academies. Looking at it from people, we've looked at the school's workforce census, and around 477 trusts have 250 people in them. And looking at turnover from the funding from the Department for Education, 85 trusts have turnover over 36 million. Now, the issue is all three don't have to apply. Only two of these three criteria have to apply to you. So if you fall into two of those categories, then you will, or more of those categories, you will need to submit a report in your annual accounts. So what does it actually mean? What it means, you're going to have to put in your annual accounts at the end of the year by the 31st of December with the reporting period that the Academy just worked to. You're going to have to report information on your gas, electricity, oil consumption in your buildings, as well as vehicles such as minibuses, vans that you may have as a trust, as well as staff mileage claims. What we'll look at is how you can analyse that and model it, and there's different ways. And we've developed a free tool to help you do this, which we can share with you if you want to drop us an email at the end of the presentation, that helps you collect that. Now, some of our clients where we're already working with, we've already got their energy data, their gas, electric data, so they don't need to collect that data. They'll only just need to collect the staff vehicle and mileage claims and things like that. So we're starting to look at how to simplify the process for you. And then you need to develop a single page report that you put into your annual accounts. And again, we've got a sample in this presentation deck of what that might look like. So the detail, and again, this is for you to take away rather than me talk through it now. It's looking at your annual energy use in the UK. It's looking at, as I say, this is the real detail behind it. You need to develop an intensity ratio. And the department have suggested that you work it on a ratio per pupil. And again, we've built that into some of the modelling that we'll show you later on in the presentation. You've got to explain what methodology you've used to calculate it. And again, that's very easy to do. And then you've got to track it year on year and put some narrative around the energy improvement strategies that you've put in place. So what we were trying to do is keep the data capture simple. How much energy have you used? How much gas and oil have you used? How many miles have your vehicles travelled? These are the simple things. And there's two ways that you can look at this. Is one is doing a big data capture exercise. One is looking at whether you have the data already through solutions you have in place. One of the trickier ones to do is to look at vehicle usage, and what we've tried to do here is look at how many vehicles you've got and how you capture that data. And once you started to capture it, it's probably easier to do. So you need to do a reading of the mileometers on your vehicles that you operate at the start of the academic year and the end of the academic year. But once you've done that once, that's easy to do. And I think part of the challenge is the announcement from the department earlier in the year. If they're doing it prior to the start of this academic year, you'd be able to start capturing some of this data now. So you may have some challenges getting the readings as of the 1st of September, but you've probably got processes in place for managing minibuses already. So you may want to use the nearest reading you've got to the start of the academic year. One thing to think about in in relation to capturing staff mileage, it may be that you're already capturing expenses and things like that for staff, and you are looking at that data, and it may be that the majority of your staff will do less than 10,000 miles. So it's a very easy calculation. If you're paying them 45 pence a mile, your expenses bill is £4,500, then your staff have travelled 10,000 miles in the year. It's those sort of things that you could capture. So putting in some nominal codes in line with the Academy Chart of Accounts, it may help you track that rather than having to do a paper-based exercise at the end of the year going through everybody's expenses claim. So just try and think of ways of simplifying it and those sort of things. And now obviously coding that into things like PSF or Hogue and things like that may take a little bit of setting up, but this isn't just a one-off. It's a multi-year program of capturing data. So once you've got it set up, it may help you in the long term. And again, there's bespoke formulas about how much carbon that creates, and again, this is built into the model that we've developed and things like that, and we'll share with you after today. Looking at the scope, and again, this is where you have to start to analyse it. There's three key areas: direct greenhouse gas emissions, which is about burning fuel, be that gas or transportation. There's indirect emissions, which is where the emissions are made by the generator of electricity. So it's about the energy you purchase. And then looking at indirect emissions is where you are responsible for it in the terms of staff cars and vehicles and things like that, private cars. It doesn't cover rail travel and things like that. That's the responsibility of the railway companies and things like that. And it doesn't cover transport, there'd be taxis or buses that the staff may use. So again, that's not your responsibility to report on those issues. The next slide is is a screenshot from the model we've created, which is looking about your methodology. So what we've done is we've broken it into the three scope areas, and we've started to look at the areas that may apply to you as a trust. And again, this can be tweaked depending on the nature of your staff's use or the way your trust works. One of the things there's one thing to look at here, which may reflect well on some of you that are already looking at buying your energy from the likes of EDF or from renewable sources. There is the ability within the reporting to state the difference between the energy you buy from standard sources and renewable sources. Now, the standard model that was published by the department, which is where I've used some of these figures from, so you can track it back and see how it all works. It doesn't capture that granularity, and what we've done is the reporting target for renewable is a conversion factor of 0, so you can use that, which in some cases is going to present you in a very good light, and will help you on that journey to be presenting your carbon reduction target. So again, these are sort of things you can look at and as you go forward. One of the key issues, as I mentioned earlier, is the intensity ratio, and I think there's two things to think about when you're looking at the intensity ratio: is what you're having to present externally and what you present internally. And I think for those of you who saw my last workshop about carbon reduction, I think the internal targets often are more powerful for you than the external ones, and I think the intensity ratio of carbon per student is a very easy one to do, and coming out in the modelling. The internal ones, looking at your operational costs, looking at the cost per square metre, cost per student, start to show up some interesting challenges for you going forwards. Part of the challenge for you is to present how are you going to improve your energy efficiency. So in addition to just giving your intensity ratios and saying how much energy you've used, part of what the whole purpose of this exercise is to get you to think about how much energy you're using, and what we've done here is pick up 10 key areas of things that you could do as ways of improving your energy efficiency. And these are the sort of things that you may want to think about. Do you want to put smart metering and doing data analysis to try and understand your data better? Do you want to undertake energy audits and look at controls? Do you want to put LED lighting in and boiler replace? Do you want big capital programs? Do you want to do not energy efficiency programs, but buying your energy and reducing your carbon footprint by buying your stuff at a fixed price, by looking at photovoltaics and solar thermal, and looking at cloud computing and looking at cooling and ventilation upgrades? There's a whole range of things you can do, but as I say, part of the idea behind that is this is what it's all about. It isn't about reporting, it's about what are you doing to reduce your carbon footprint to help the government meet their targets. And this is what a sample report would look like, and this can be done in landscape and portrait, but we've tried to make this work on the slide. But these are the sort of things that have come out. How much emissions you've got from your gas and from your vehicles, how much have you got from your standard electricity, how much from your renewables, what have you got from staff mileage, and then the actions that I've put in. 3 actions there, because I think you've got to have something that is going to work for you. Does that make sense? And it's not overly ambitious and saying something you can't deliver. But so I've tried to keep it simple and in the model, this is a drop-down list of wording around the 10 areas that you could potentially put in and report. So going into more detail about why are we doing it, and I think this is the bit that you have to remember in this journey. There is a real reason of why we're trying to do it. It's not just a paperwork exercise, which I think at times some of these things can feel like. And I think part of what we're trying to do is the government are wanting you to focus on how are you going to reduce your sector's carbon reduction by 32%, by 50% by 2032 from the 2017 levels. And schools equate to 22% of the government's carbon footprint. So this is part of the reason for doing it. And I guess, yes, from an academy's point of view, it's only 5,000 of the 25,000 schools that are impacted by that, but the view is that down the line, probably every school will be expected to report on this. It's not the starting point is a large academy trust, but it will be something that will impact all trusts and schools as we go forward. And schools are already doing a big chunk of this. And part of the reason being is that schools equate to 4 million tonnes of carbon. That they are consuming 5 billion kilowatts of energy, and there is over 900 million pounds a year being spent on energy, and there are some troubling consumption patterns. We're working and we have data on 22 trusts, 165 academies that shows that 55% of the energy is being spent when there are no children in the building. And that, if you start to look at those issues, and if you take that 55% and you take that across 900 million pounds, then that's over 470 million pounds that's being spent when there are no children in the building. And what can you do with that money? It's not just about carbon, it's about all the impact that spending can have. Does that make sense? And so again, part of the idea of looking at the data and understanding your data is that it starts to get you to think about actually how can we do something about this now? How can we be ambitious? And what is it? Can we move a school off grid? Can we look at cloud computing? And obviously in the current climate we've all been going through, cloud computing has a real benefit in facilitating online learning and all of those sort of things. Is there more we can do about our carbon footprint, about the supply chain? Can we move our minibuses to electric vehicles? How do we really reduce our energy spend? And that's the piece that we want to look at. What I want to do now is to touch on some of the other organisations that we are working with and some of the success stories that have been going on, and to try and get you to think about other ways of doing this, to look at that long-term piece and not just think about it as a reporting exercise. So we're doing some work with Ashton, which is a charity that's trying to do work not just in the UK but around the world about climate reduction in schools, and they're currently launching a campaign which they're wanting Academy Trust to sign up to look at how they can get UK schools to be zero carbon by 2030. So not going for the government target of 50%, but actually getting to 100% by 2030, 20 years ahead of the government target. And basically they're looking at having a whole programme of work about less CO2. And again, Alex Green at Ashton is happy to talk to you and provide you with support from the programs that they are running, and her contact details are at the end of my presentation. But what Ashton have picked up on, and there is that your carbon footprint from your buildings is really only around about 37% of your carbon footprint. So we've said that your buildings, over 50% of your carbon footprint is when there's no children in the building, but your buildings only equate to 30% of your carbon footprint. Things like procurement, about getting stuff to you, about getting fruit and vegetables to you for your catering, getting stationery to you, getting a whole range of other things to you. Your transport and travel, both your students and staff, equate to 16% of your carbon footprint, and it's how do you do something about that as well, and that's what Ashton are looking at trying to do, and this is where it's beyond what we are looking at as just a purely reporting exercise. That hearts and minds bit, the David Attenborough programs and on the Blue Planet and Greta Thunberg's program of trying to encourage people to think differently. The young people that we're working with I've really got a passion for it, and how do we support them and do something different going forward. Again, we're working with the Small Piece Trust, which is doing an awful lot of work around engineering, but how do you bring the carbon reduction message into the curriculum? And again, Small Piece have got a whole range of programs, STEM days, challenging students and working with them. And again, Dr. Kerry Stenson's details at the end of this, but there's a whole range of things that they're doing to link this reporting into the curriculum and getting young people thinking about it, looking at the green agenda. We've seen the announcements in recent weeks about the £560 million of investment that could be put into schools to improve buildings. If you invested that £560 million as the government into LED lighting, that £560 million becomes 1.2 billion. If you invest it in PV, it becomes 2.2 billion. Because the returns on the energy efficiency programs are huge. So it's how do we stimulate and prepare people for that green economy, and that's what the Small Piece Trust are trying to do, and stimulate you thinking about how to get your young people into careers in the green economy. We've been working with trusts for a number of years on this journey, and so and some of the trusts have already started on that journey. We've been working with Brooke Weston since 2016 in Ormiston on their carbon reduction journey as part of the Matt Loan pilot that we did. And Brooke Weston have already reduced their carbon footprint by 50% in some of their academies, and that's 12 years ahead of the government target. And that was with many respects with minimal investment in their estate, but so it can be done. And we're now working with them on getting under the skin of that 50% of their energy that's still spent when there's no children in the building, and looking at things like IT, looking at cooling, looking at fridges and freezers during the August close down period. And again, a lot of the trusts that we're working with have been looking at reducing their footprint during the COVID period, and have actually reduced their carbon footprint below the August levels and down at 70% of their energy consumption. So there's a whole range of opportunities that we can do on starting that journey and going forward in that way. And again, we're just starting on a program with Green Shell Learning Trust, and they're investing with Lissimore Capital £3.5 million in their estate to get to 50% carbon reduction in a 12-week program, and they're going to be saving over £9 million over the warranted life of the solutions they're putting in place, and they're going to be reducing their carbon footprint by 55,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide over that period of time. So again, there's a lot of things that can be done very quickly and make a real impact, but it's getting you to think about the fact that it's not just about reporting. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview. I think, as I say, I didn't want to go into too much detail on the the process. I think that there's lots of information out there. I think the tool that we've got will help you on that journey and get you thinking about how to collect the data. Then you may want to tweak it and amend it to meet the needs of your trust. But hopefully that's given you an overview of where we've got to. And I think that the challenge is now to hopefully start to think about it. Contact Rob and I if you want to know more about the information that we've shared with you. As I say, we'll be sharing all of the slide deck and the paper that we've written previously on this. Do get in touch with Alex and Kevin if you want to know more about the programs that they're running. But hopefully, as I say, that's giving you an insight into where we've got to. So hopefully now Rob and I are going to answer some questions. Rob's going to curate me, and if there's some questions come through, and we'll go forward from there. But thanks all for your time, and do get in touch if you have any more questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. Fantastic. If I could just ask you, Jonathan, to mute your mic while I'm talking. I think we've got a bit of an issue with echo when we're both on.
Okay.
And just to do the first question, I've answered one online, so hopefully people have seen that. But there was a question regarding requirements to satisfy all of the requirements for the whether this SECR applied to you, and just to be clear, it's whether you meet 2 or more of those turnover headcount requirements that defines you as a large company. So hopefully you've seen that on the published question and answer sessions. Jonathan, a question for you. How would energy purchased through, this is from Clive Hammond at the Academies Enterprise Trust, how would energy purchased through green tariffs be treated? Would they be treated as carbon neutral in the calculations?
There's 2 ways you can do. There's a simple reporting solution and a detailed one. And if you're buying energy from a big green deal, or you can declare that as a 0 rating from our reading of the legislation. So if it's nuclear, if it's coming from green sources, so again you can get a green deal from the likes of EDF or npower and things like that, or you go to Good Energy or Ecotricity. Yeah, you've got to check the mix that they state, and they will probably give you a specific figure you can use for their specific mix of energy that they buy from the grid.
Thank you. And another question is perhaps linked to that, but how would you treat electric vehicles in the calculations? Presumably to do with how you're actually powering them and charging them.
I think I would need to check on what you do with staff vehicles on that one, because I haven't found a granular level of detail on when staff are claiming expenses. But on the again, what you can do is you can break down the reporting into the different types of vehicle if you want. There is a generic carbon figure for public vehicles and minibuses. There are 2 different figures, one for cars and one for minibuses, and then there's a different figure again for electric vehicles. So if you want to put greater granularity into your reporting, you can do that and report the electric vehicles at a lower level, so your carbon intensity ratio would be lower. Thank
you. Next question is more of an admin thing here, but just to clarify how delegates will get the reporting tool that you've referred to. And I think if what we shall do after the session today is we'll be emailing out a copy of the slide deck to everyone, so that you can review the slides that Jonathan's prepared, and then by emailing either myself or Jonathan or our marketing manager Noor Shamil, who set this webinar up, who will be sending those slides out, replying to any of us, and we can send you that that document and that reporting tool. And then also the webinar itself is recorded, and we will be making the webinar available to everyone via a link on our website if you want to either share with colleagues, other organisations or schools, or just rewatch it yourself at some other point in time. And the next question is relating to the future of this, really, Jonathan. Someone has said that there are a number of areas where reporting is optional and could be done on an average basis. Is there any indication that the level of data reporting will become more granular than currently? And if so, would you recommend any areas that aren't currently being required to be reported that trusts might consider starting to collect data on as a bit of a preemptive measure?
We're starting to, and this is part of the reason why I was touching on the broader areas. I think there's a debate about what is your carbon footprint. Is it just about the easy items, as you say, electricity, gas, mileage and things like that? I think there will be a conversation, and I think that's part of the reason why Ashton are raising it, is around that broader impact you have about travel and those sort of things of students and things like that. I think, I guess the challenge on it is how you gather that data, and I think that's quite complex at the moment, and it's who would be responsible for it. If we're saying again people to use public transport more, then the public transport organisation is responsible for reporting on that, so you don't want to be double counting data. But I think that there will be a desire for more reporting. I think probably in the first instance it will be more reporting for smaller organisations rather than more reporting in granularity. But and I think you can put more detail into this, and I think it depends whether you're seeing this as something, and again, as we talked about with Greenshore see reducing their carbon footprint by 50% as an important part of what they are doing as a trust. And I think if you start looking at putting more granularity into it, it shows you've got a greater desire to make that impact. Does that make sense? So if you start to say, well, okay, yeah, we have separated out between our staff who are driving around in electric vehicles as against those that are driving around in petrol vehicles, that starts to show that granularity. But that's, I think, is a story you want to start to tell. And again, we've got a number of trusts who are working to get to 75% by 2025, and it's the last bit. That last 25% is the expensive bit. The getting to 75% is the easy bit. Getting to 100% is the difficult bit. And I think that's the journey we'll all be going on. And I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to get any easier for us. I think so. But at the moment, I haven't seen anything that says we're going to have to start reporting on how you procure and how you get deliveries and those sort of things. But I hope that helps. There's another question I noticed, Rob, in relation to mixture of sources, about if you're buying the energy from the LA should be able to give you, or YPO or the like should be able to give you a mix on that. We're doing some work with YPO on this, where we've been doing some work with YPO on their PV frameworks and things like that. So I think that there will be the ability to get that data from your pool procurement organisation and things like that. So I think they should be able to give you a mix. Some of you will get that on your bills. It actually tells you on your electricity bill for the mix of energy and as well. So.
That's great, and we've just had maybe make this the final question from Darren here, who has got some special schools within the trust. They've got quite high demand and low pupil numbers, which gives them potentially quite a poor rating. Is the general intention here to penalise people for having bad scores, or is it really to just look at measuring this so that you can make year-on-year improvements?
I think in the first instance it's to work on year-on-year improvements, and I think that is the challenge. There is the opportunity, Dan, is to look at other intensity ratios. You may say you want to do it on the square meterage of your building, but again, also you might want to do it on staff. So in the context of your special schools, your staff to ratio is probably higher than a lot of other schools. So that it's working on an intensity ratio that works for you, that you think is a fair reflection on your building. But again, with the nature of the buildings, you've got the hydrotherapy pools, a lot of minibuses. It's there, and I think I'm happy to spend some time and look at that with you on a one-to-one basis. If you want to drop me an email afterwards, and we can help you look at that in a bit more detail. But please do give us a call.
Thanks, Jonathan. And just to say, there've been a few sort of quite minor sort of administrative questions in terms of timescales, reporting periods, and that sort of thing. I think rather than trying to deal with that now, perhaps we can just collate those, wrap it up, and send that out as an answer with the slide deck.
Yeah, it is a fairly easy answer, Rob. There is no separate reporting. And all you are needed to do is you should be working with your auditors, because your auditors should be asking you for the reports to go into your annual accounts. It will go in as part of your submission to the department. There's two slightly different challenges for you as a trust. Is that the normal reporting period from a financial point of view is 9 months after the end of your financial year, which gives you the time. But for the Department for Education, you have to submit your audited accounts to the department by the 31st of December, is my understanding of the date for this year. Now, the date this year might change because of COVID, but my understanding is currently you need to submit as a trust, you will need to submit your accounts, and all it is a page in your account. So there's no central reporting on government spreadsheets. You need to upload it into you need to put it as a page in your chart in your audited accounts, and work with your auditors on that. So that is the only thing that we are advised that you need to be doing.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you everyone for attending. It's obviously been a very popular webinar. As noted, we will send out the slide deck and all the supporting information. And if there's anything you want to follow up on following the presentation, obviously contact either myself or Jonathan in the first instance, and or of course Ashton and the Small Peace Trust as referred to in the slide deck. And we look forward to having some conversations with you in due course. And thank you again. Any follow-up sessions will obviously be publicising, so we hope to see you virtually, if not in person, again very soon. Thank you very much.